Hello, BookTube. I'm here to discuss a book that was actually gifted to me through my wish list. It's Dhalgren by Samuel R Delany in this nice SF Masterworks edition by, Golan's put it out, uh, Orion Publishing. And it was originally, this is the 2010 edition, and originally was published in 1974. It's a big book. It's just over 800 pages. And I sort of bumped this up as soon as I got it because I've wanted to reread it. I originally read it in 91, 92, so it's been 30, maybe 1990. So it's been about 30 to 32 years since I've read it. And just some of there are blurbs as usual in the front. And it says, I consider Delany not only one of the most important SF writers of the present generation, but a fascinating writer in general who has invented a new style. That's Umberto Eco. And the very best ever to come out of the science fiction field, a literary landmark, Theodore Sturgeon. This has an introduction by Gwyneth Jones and an afterword by I always forget his name. William Gibson. Now, William Gibson says it's a puzzle without a solution, and I think that's about right. I guess the big question is it a good book? Well, let's discuss it a little bit, and then I'll come back to that question at the end. We start out a story that is, the narration starts out in the middle of a sentence. Let me get to it here. To wound an autumnal city. It starts out in the middle of a sentence there. Chapter 1. Prison Mirror Lens. And there's a young man who's hitchhiking. He's going to city of Bologna. Bologna. And he's a bit odd because he's got some memories, but he doesn't know his name. He knows when he was born, and he has memories from earlier days. He's very young looking. Like he looks like almost a mid or young teenager, but he is older. He's got sort of gnarly, calloused fingers and hands, and he wears one sandal. And as we find out later, he lost the sandal when he was walking, and he was chased by a dog or some dogs, and he lost it, and he just never got it back. So he hitches a ride with a truck driver. The truck driver tells him that, there's sort of the National Guard around the city. He won't be able to get in, but there's nothing around. So he winds up in the city, and he meets a few people, and they take him to a little commune, and there's gangs that are roving the street at nighttime, and they've got like a holographic image, and they're called dragons, and the thing, but they have different images that they have this generator on themselves that generates this image that it lights up, but you can't see inside. You can't see them inside, but they can see outward. So, but he tells him he doesn't remember his name, and so they call him Kid because he looks like a kid. So he doesn't really want to join the commune, who are sort of, collecting food and that, because it turns out this city, there's a problem with this city. It used to be like 2 million or more people in it. Now it's down to less than 2,000, and a lot of gangs going around. There's been fires going through the city. They have a newspaper, and the publisher he'll sometimes put the correct day of the week on it, but he'll but he'll put something like, January 1st, 1776, and it's sort of the local news. So, but he doesn't want to be part of this commune group who they're trying to get people together, and they're feeding other people because they scrounge and collect food. They're digging latrines and things like that, and they have this big fireplace, open fireplace, cooking area that they cook for everybody. But he eventually meets this young woman who was there. One of the ones that are running the commune was a student in the city. And there's always sort of overcast smoke and everything in the sky. So they can't really see much. But he's befriended by one of the ones that sort of first found him coming into the city, and he's taken back to his place. He doesn't really stay at the commune. He sort of sees them a little bit and not. And he's got a little shack up on top of a old empty warehouse, and it's full of books. And he takes him back, the kid back to his little hovel, and seduces him. And he leaves. He meets a young woman, as I was saying, and he starts a relationship with her. And they live out in the park. Just put down a blanket, and they sleep in the park at nighttime. And it goes on. He starts meeting other people. He starts talking to the gang and everything. And he goes off with one of the gang members. And he thinks he's just gone one day, but he disappeared for like a week or more. And she was looking for him, the girl that he met. But he has no recollection of this. It's just to him a day. And other strange things begin happening, we find out through the narrative. But, before he disappeared, his girlfriend found a notebook in the park. The covers are sort of burnt off and torn off. It's a spile-bound booklet, notebook. And it's got writing on one page, and the one page is blank. So he starts scribbling, he starts writing, and he starts writing some poetry. And he reads sometimes, and we see in the narration of where of the notebook. And the last page we find out of the notebook ends in sort of a beginning of a sentence. And it's sort of broken off. Sort of says that it would be better than here. It just goes on, and it says, and then beyond Holland and into the hills I have come to, and that's where it ends. And we see that in the narration. But he gets mixed up with the gang, and he winds up being actually head of the gang. Because he just sort of he saved one of the gang members, and they think he's very brave. But like he has these lapses of memory, and he thinks he might be going crazy again, because he said he did spend some time. He remembers in an asylum. He had mental issues, and he thinks that this is happening again because he keeps losing time. He works for a family who's basically they are denying the fact that the city is in ruins and burning. They live in an apartment building. They want to move to another floor. He helps them move. One of the elevators isn't working, so it's just a shaft, but it opens up, and their son falls and dies. He writes a poem about this, like very graphic details of what the body's like after hitting, dropping 9 or 10 floors in the elevator shaft. And he meets other people. Like he meets a poet that comes in to the city, and he tells him he's writing poetry, that he just started writing poetry. The poet that's visiting is living, and he meets an astronaut as well. But he the publisher of the newspaper wants to look and wants to publish his poetry because he's writing it there at the time. So he gets a book published, his poetry published, um, called Orchid or Orchids something, because the gang members will carry this sort of glove that's razor fingers, and it's called an orchid. But as I say, other strange things are happening because the friend that took him to his hut on top of the building says that strange things do happen, because he says, in that direction, the light is coming from one day, but then it'll change and it'll be in a different direction. And he just thinks, well, he must have forgotten this. But then he'll go to a shop or store that he gets food and stuff from, and all of a sudden it's getting empty, but he goes back again and it's full. And fires will start in one neighborhood, burn out the neighborhood, and then you go back the next week or the next day, and the houses are still there. One night, the skies clear up a bit, and there's another moon. There's two moons, and they can't figure it out. What's happening there? And there's a myriad of other characters all throughout. He's in a three-way relationship with the woman, who he gets back with the woman, like he's living with the and the nest, they call it, with the gang, and he's got a younger male partner there as well. So they get together, and there's it's fairly graphic sex scenes throughout. And he's still writing, he publishes this book, and everybody gets it, and he's the talk of the town, sort of. And they all think he's great, and they all want to meet him. But he, like he says, he just doesn't know what's happening to him. And he's continuing writing in the notebook in that, but he gets it sort of filled up. And then at some point near the the last section of it, they're in a burning neighborhood. They have to leave the town. He meets another woman coming in, and there's a few of them that leave the town. But before that happens, the last section is kind of interesting. It is, because it's almost as if it's like the narrator says, this is the notebook that they found, and they're sort of publishing it the way it is. And there are bits like this, like you got the narration around here, then you've got this other bit in the center, and it's basically what the notebook is. Like, there's the original writing in the notebook, and then he's, and then there's space around the edges, like he's running out of space, so he starts writing around the edges, and that's where this section comes in, like this. And sometimes the section, this relates to this, but it'll start in mid-sentence and end in mid-sentence, and then it sort of like goes on again many pages later, and like that piece that is 10 pages later might actually be the beginning part of what was 10 pages before, or it could be the continuation, and the same as this. And it's really kind of hard to follow. And the weird thing is that the whole book ends, like I say, with that like he's read already halfway through the book. We know what the end line of the notebook says is, but the way the book ends, it's that last little paragraph that is in it's the end of the book, and it's as if he's writing it as he's left the city, but he's already talked about it when he was in the city before. So there's a duality or something weird going on with time, because he's losing time. He has, issues, mental issues, like there's drug issues in this as well, racial issues. It is And like I say, it's like the last section's a bit difficult to follow, and I kept flipping back to see, oh, where does this connect with the thing, like with the narrative, and it sometimes just doesn't connect. So you don't know what's really happening. Like, there's something weird going on here. They get out of the city. Everything else in the rest of the country and the rest of the world, like this is set in the United States. The rest of the country, everything seems to be fine. It's just everything's up in this city. It's just time is happening differently, or it appears to be. Or is it that he's just having an episode, like a psychotic episode, and he's writing about this because there's two different handwritings, because he finds this notebook to say that this is, somebody else was writing in it, but then in the last section he's writing those things for the first time. So somehow has the notebook got back in time and somehow wound up in the city? Like, none of this is explained. None of this is explained at all. Um, and it's like I say, it's an interesting book, and I guess coming back to the fact, is this a good book? I don't know. I've read it twice. I enjoy it, but and I think it's like it's 800 pages. If it was 200 pages, I'm quite sure I would just dismiss this and say it's a piece of crap. But because it's so long and you're immersed in the characters in this world, and you get lost with the character kid, who actually could be Dhalgren, because in the notebook there's a list of names and Dhalgren is one of the names. Is he Dhalgren? But he's the kid. He doesn't like the nickname, but he's the kid. And as I say, it's you get immersed. You get immersed in this world, in this weird world. And Samuel R. Delany is an interesting writer, to say the least. I was looking up, once I finished this, I looked it up, and I guess he's had episodic times of mental illness. And he would talk about seeing things that nobody else would, like burned section of the city that would appear and disappear to him. Nobody else would see it. So, and it's sort of this is sort of in narrative form of things that he saw. And what is happening here? We don't know. We don't know. William Gibson says it's a puzzle and he can't figure it out. He says the puzzle is not meant to be solved. It's just a thought process. Like it's a experimental novel. They compare it at times to Ulysses and other experimental novels. I've tried to sample some other experimental novels. Like I've read some from, like, I think Berlin Alexanderplatz. I would call that a bit of an experimental novel. And again, I think it works because if they're huge books, you get immersed in this. It does a bit of a thing on your brain, and you get immersed in it. It's either going to work for you or not. But is it a good book? By virtue of that you get immersed, and the writing, he's a damn good writer. Like, he knows how to put a sentence together, and it's sort of thrilling to read in many ways. I think so anyway. Everything that I've read by him is that way. But is it a good book? Is it a good book? Like I say, if being immersed in something and enjoying it, that's a good book. But most of the time, at least and I think people go to a book for a story. What's the story here? That's the question. You follow the character through, and you see the other characters. It's difficult to pigeonhole, and it's not. I wouldn't say it's for everybody. And the question is too: is it really science fiction? There's no sort of science is that, but what's happening here? Like, there is the time dilation that he's experiencing, with no explanation for it. There's the two moons. There's this Oh, I didn't maybe mention that. Yeah, in the daytime, all of a sudden there's a huge sun that takes up like the most of the sky that appears, for a while, and it's like a burning sun. And that was actually on the original cover of the paperback, the one I read 32 years ago. So does that make it science fiction? It's definitely, I think it would more fit under, I don't like the term, but speculative fiction. That's where like, this actually works for that. Um, and even though I hate saying that, because I don't like the term speculative fiction, but I think this actually works for that. But is it a good book? Yes, I think it is. I actually think it is, for all those reasons why, like I say, it's immersive. If it's short, it wouldn't be. And this is the second time I've read it. I probably will read it again someday, and see how I feel about it. Like I say, it's not for everybody because it's a long book, and you've got to go into it and just sort of go with the flow. Not really trying to figure anything out, but trying to remember things and then looking back, which is perfectly fine to try to figure out stuff. But you don't have to spend too much time on it going, what is he doing here? You do, but you just try to go with the flow as much as possible. Like I say, there's quite a bit of sex. There's uh, uh, straight sex, gay sex in it, and there's like a huge population that's left there, are a black population. So the N word is thrown around big time. And that's a bit of an oddity because, like, even, and I'm not talking just 21st century thing, but when you hear this in a book that is, or at least me, in a modern book, and this, I definitely modern, this is 1970s, and you see this word bandied about so much, it's a bit jarring in some ways, but I think he handles it well because of the way it's done. Because it's not as if it's accepted, this word, especially not by this one white kid uses it and gets the living crap kicked out of him basically for using the word. But not everybody does. That's the thing. They sort of pick on this one kid. And there's some neat things about these holographic, uh, you know, dragons. This gang, and you've got a society. You got the gangs going around. You've got a group that's sort of a commune group that's trying to rebuild things. Then you've got this family that's trying to deny that's going on. Like the father goes out to work every day, but there's nothing to work at. There's no office. There's nobody. Like, there's the office that's still there, but there's no workers. So what does he do all day? And that is a question that gets asked. And the daughter is, there's descriptions of a rape scene with the daughter, with another character that is, there's posters of him all over the place naked, and he's a celebrity there, and he's open about what he did to this white girl, and she wants to see him all the time, and it's like, it's a very weird thing. Like, there's a lot of things that you just go, ooh, that's a little odd. And it is odd, and it's meant to shock, I think. It's meant to shock. It's meant to be visceral and shocking in many ways. And I think that's part of it, because it's like that is part of the thing. And it's not just, done and left. It's explored. Those things are explored. And that's why I think as well it does make it a good book. So if you're adventurous, I would suggest, if you've got some time, I read this over, what is it, 3 days, 3.5 days. Um, and if you immerse yourself in it, that's where I think you get the most out of it. If you just pick it up and read 10 pages here or there and continue, I don't think it's going to work. You need to immerse yourself in this story, in this world. I'm definitely like I say, I'm going to read this again, and I'm going to read more of Samuel R. Delany. I've looked up; he's been teaching. He's still alive. He's 78 or 79, I think. He started writing early. Like I think he sent stuff to John W. Campbell, but Campbell being Campbell, and Samuel R. Delany being black, and having a black protagonist, it just not fit. It did not fit with Campbell. uh, you know, and there's a lot of drugs in his writing, like, well, at least drug trippy type stuff, whether it be actual hallucinogenics, or caused by mental illness. I think is another thing. But he's also, like I say, he's been teaching. He's got a lot of writing that he's been doing about writing about science fiction, and I do want to dip into some of that because it'd be interesting to see his view on it. And I've never been like people who watch my channel. It's like I'm usually just a classics, science fiction guy, pre 1965 mostly. But there are occasions, like I say, with the new wave and stuff, and he fits into the new wave that came out post 65, even though he was starting a little bit before that. Well, like there was stuff that was proto new wave, I guess you would say, that was starting in the 50s, that were breaking away from Campbell and the traditional sense of science fiction and getting more in the brain and more esoteric and ambiguous and abstract ideas. Some writers are good at it, or at least I think they're good, and he is definitely good. And so yeah, so this is one of an example that I'm not just bound to old science fiction and old stuff. If it's something that twigs my interest, it doesn't matter when it was written, it'll work. So yes, again, I'll reiterate, this is a good book. I do caution people to pick it up. Like I say, do go into it with an open mind and immerse yourself in it when you've got the time. And if you've read a lot of science fiction and weird stuff, I guess you would say, drug trip type stuff, if you read any of that kind of thing, then you'll know what to expect with this. And I think it will be rewarding. I think it will be rewarding. It's either going to be very rewarding, or you're going to wind up throwing the book across the room after 100 or 200 pages. The first 50 or so pages is not the easiest narrative to read. I'll caution that, but do get by it, and I think it will be rewarding to those that do immerse themselves in this. So anyway, I've prattled on enough. Any questions or concerns, then just comments or email me. There is a book out there which I'd like to get maybe sometime. It's a book about Dhalgren, about this book, and how. And I think one of the things is how you read it. So it might say to read it in different orders and stuff like that, which could be interesting as well. With these experimental books. So that would be interesting to look at sometime. But anyway, I hope everybody's doing well, and I'll talk to you later.